everyone, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, in this video, I'm gonna explain all of you about methodical history of language teaching. And before I next this explanation, I'm gonna introduce myself. My name is Alya Zalsabila, and I'm from English Education Class A. Okay, the first I'm going to explain all of you the definition about methodical. This is from expert Edward Anthony about the methodical. The first step toward developing a principled approach to language teaching will be to turn back the clock about the century order to learn from the historical circles and the trends have taught as the present day. And from the expert Edward Anthony, the concept of method was the second of three hierarchical elements, namely approach, method, and technique. An approach, according to Anthony, was a set of assumptions dealing with the nature of language learning and teaching. And the method was described as an overall plan for systematic presentation of language based upon the selected approach. So the technique were the specific activity manifested in the classroom and from the teaching method. And the second material about the explanation about the according to Richard and Rogers about the specification and method. So from they was an umbrella learned to the specification and interrelation of theory and practice. So an approach defines assumption, helix and theory about the nature of language and language learning. Decision specific the relationship of those theory to the classroom materials and activity. So from the expert, produce are the technique and practice. They are derived from one approach and the second. And the next slide is about this is the method, approach, design, and procedure. And the first is there are approach. There are two steps. The first is a theory of nature of language. The second is theory of nature language. And second, there are the general and specific object, syllabus model, types of learning and teaching activity. I think you can see this is slide. And third is procedure. The first is classroom technique and practice and behavior observed when the method is used. The next materials about approach, method, and technique. So the definition about approach, method, and technique, you can see this is slide. So I'm gonna explain about all of you about the approach. Okay, in the century spanning in the mid 1880, the mid 1980, the language technique profession was involved in research. So, for example, for the approach, at the approach level, the unit importance of learning and relaxing state of mental awareness just above the depths of consequence. The method that in linguistic objective, and I think method tend to be concerned primary with the teacher and student roles and behavior, and secondarily with such features as linguistic and subject matter objective, sequence, and materials. About the curriculum and syllabus is the definition about deciding for crying out the particular language from grammar features include primer concern with the specification of linguistic and subject matter objective, sequence, and material to meet the needs deciding made. And next, the grammar translation method, and you can see the description about the grammar translation method. You can see in the slide, and I will explain all of you about the grammar, about the characteristic from the grammar translation. The first is classes as taught in the mother tongue with little active use the target language. The second is much vocabulary is taught in the form of list and isolated words. And the third is long collaborate explanation of the intricacies of grammar are given. And the fourth is grammar provide the rules for putting words together and instruction for focus on the form and inflection of words. And the next is reading of difficult classical text is begun early. And the next is little attention is paid of content of text which are treated as exercises in grammatical analysis. And the next is other often the only there is exercises in translating disconnect sentence from the target language into the mother tongue. And next about is and the last one is little or no attention given to pronunciation. It is ironic. I think it is ironic from that is because that is methods was has until very recently been to stalwart among many completed models. And the next materials, the audiolingual method. So the characteristic from the audiolingual method is the first is new material is presented in dialogue form, and second is there is dependence of mimicry, memorization, asset praise, and over learning. And the third is structure are sequenced by means of constructive analysis and taught one at a time. And next is structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. And the next is there is little or no grammatical explanation. I think grammar is taught by inductive analogy rather than by deductive explanation. And the next is about vocabulary is strictly limited and learned in context. And next is there is much use of tapes, language labs, and visual aids. And the next is great importance and attached to pronunciation. And the next is very little use the reader tongue by teaching is primitive. And the next materials about the Steiner method in the spirited 1970. From the explanation you can see in this slide, and but I'm gonna explain all of you about the there are 5 of these product of the spirited in the 1970. The first is community language learning by the decade of the 1970, as we increasingly recognize the importance of the affective domain. Some innovative methods took on the strictly affective nature, and community language learning is a classic example of affective based method. And the second is Suggespedia, other new method and decade were not quite as strictly effective in Suggespedia. For example, was a method that was derived from Bulagian psychology, George Lozanov, and to expert convention that the human brain cold process great quantities of material is given the right condition for learning, among which are the state of relaxation and giving cover of control the teacher. And the next is the silent way, like Suggespedia. I think the silent way rested on more cognitive than affective argument from the theoretical sustains, and I think the silent way. There are the behind from the theory. The first is learning facilitates in the learn discourse creates, and rather than burst repeat what is that to the learn. And then next is learning is facilitated by a company physical object. And the third is learning is facilitated by problem solving involving the material to be learned. And the fourth about the theory is total physical response from the James Asser in the 1977. The development of total physical response actually began experimenting with the TPR in the 1960, but it was almost a decade before the method was widely discussed in professional circle. And the last one is the natural approach by Stephen Krashen in the 1982 until in the 1997, the theory of second language acquisition, or SLA, have been widely discussed and hot debate over the years. So, the major methodical of short of creation is the natural approach. It was manifested in the natural approach developed one of creation college and Tracy Tresol, and acting of many the claims that Asser made from the comprehension-based approach such as TPR. So guys, I think that's all for me. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you in the next video.